Thank you for that generous introduction, Chris. And you see the picture of Olympia, and when I think of Olympia, this, I guess, was what pops into my head. People often ask me about what I do, and I say, well, we are a firm that revitalizes cities, and they say, well, how do you revitalize a city? And so the attempt tonight is to outline how you revitalize a city and to give you some thoughts that you might consider for this wonderful place that you call Olympia. And so with that, let's start in. And so we call this Fixing Cities. Now I have not given this slideshow to anyone before. You're the first ones. And it was really because Chris gave me a call. We said we were coming on up, and she said, well, could we talk to some people? And I said, yes. And I knew this is what you'd want to talk about or want to hear something about. And so here we are, Fixing Cities. And so I hate word slides, but there are a couple of word slides we're going to use at the beginning because they're significant, and I think they establish the vocabulary for what is to come. So, why plan? People often say that, and you can read it here. And so it's about preventing, and this is not talked about often, preventing undesirable change, things that happen in your community that you really don't want to have happen because you have no plan, and so you are at the mercy of anyone who wants to come in and do something. And so over a period of time, many cities have eroded because they get many undesirable changes. And so what you really want to do is just flip that around and encourage desirable change. And then people, this is another question people have, why do plans sit on the shelf? And we hear that everywhere. Every community is the same thing. And this is really the answer, because the planning process is pretty arbitrary. Planners aren't very good at what they do, frankly. The profession isn't really good. They don't have really a system that works all the time. Public involvement is usually pretty scattershot, not very meaningful. There is usually very little design work then in the development of the revitalization plan, and so the design proposals are vague because planners, we are not very good designers, and the implementation strategy then, which follows, is weak. Success then is seldom, and it is seldom that you get a plan that is implemented. So how do you flip that around? Well, the effective approach then is to have a planning process which has all of these things. And systematic, meaningful, detailed, realistic. And what we say to communities, if you follow this recipe, success is guaranteed. We have never been in a city that has not been successful when this process has been followed. Now, finally, another word slide, urban planning. What's it all about? This gentleman by the name of Alexander Garvin wrote a book called The American City, What Works and Does Not Work. And this was his conclusion. It should be redefined as a public action that generates a sustained and widespread private market reaction, a public action. So in a way, urban planning is all about identifying those public actions. So then this is the recipe. And in thinking about it, I said, well, this is basically what we all need to do to revitalize our cities. And you see the 4 steps. The slideshow is organized around these 4 steps. And the first thing is a complete plan. And the word complete is significant because it needs to be complete. There are certain requirements that a plan needs to have, or requirements it must meet before it is complete. And so those are the essentials in a complete plan. And first of all, and we're going to hit each one of these very quickly. And the first thing is you need some game changers. And what is a game changer? Well, it's defined right here. We like these kind of little consumer reports. Good is green, and yellow is fair, and red is poor, because we can evaluate a community or a program using this formula or this recipe. So a game changer creates that immediate momentum. Game changers are strategically located in the community. They can't be just anywhere. They change the public's perception. When they are implemented, the public looks and says, aha, great things are happening in this community. Boy, isn't this an improvement? But the most important thing is they stimulate private investment and generate tax revenues, a return on that public investment. An example, 1972, Portland. This is the 1972 Portland downtown plan that got Portland started. Portland was in tough shape. The downtown was, most of the retail had disappeared. It was basically a big parking lot. And this was a 1972 plan. There were three game changers. This was one of the few diagrams in the plan that defined or identified what might happen. Pioneer Square, a public space, a transit mall where you see that green, and Waterfront Park. This was a transit mall street before. This was a transit mall street after. This was Pioneer Courthouse Square before. It was a two-story parking lot. Parking above deck, parking below. This is Pioneer Courthouse Square after. This was Waterfront before 1972. We have turned our back on the river, and here it is then today. It is a place for public events and assembly. Other projects, this is Oak Park, Illinois. This was Marion Street in the heart of the retail in the downtown. This had been closed many years before, and we did a plan. We said, you've got to open that up and allow cars and traffic on through for any number of reasons, re-street it. Most of the spaces were vacant along the street. Here it was after when it opened, and it's been a great success. The retail has come back in the downtown. Racine, Wisconsin, another case, this case of a game changer. This is a parking lot in downtown Racine, and where you see, and the game changer is within that red dotted line. When we went to Racine, we arrived in Racine, we were asked to come and give a lecture on the recipe for saving towns and cities, and they said, we have spent $200,000 on a market study. The market study tells us there is no market here. We are on the edge of the lake. Half our market is out in the lake. And we are in the Rust Belt. And industry has moved out. What do? We said, well, we'll call that phase 1. Let's go to phase 2. And phase 2, this is the game changer, which is a set of park blocks down through that parking lot, which create an environment that investors wanted to get next to. This is Lake Oswego, Oregon, before a 6-lane road running through town. The idea was to turn this into a pedestrian-friendly, retail-friendly street. Here is the demonstration project, and of course Lake Oswego has had a real recovery. So what are your game changers? I wouldn't assume to know that, but those come out of a plan, the things that then will make the difference. Another essential for a complete plan is a retail strategy. Retail is the toughest thing to get right in the downtown. And there is a formula for doing that. All of the retail consultants know that, the right configuration, and you can read around this, this circle. That is the formula. And it's important to define retail. It's the sale of merchandise as opposed to commercial, which is a sale of services. And you really don't want to mix retail and commercial in a retail zone. You want all retail. So there's ground floor commercial, a real estate office. Nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't belong in a retail zone. There's a restaurant, ground floor retail, another retail building. What people want today, wherever they are in this country, is a retail experience. But this is where people are shopping. Only 2% of the shopping is done in the downtowns. You can see the big box centers get 55% of the shopping trips, the malls, the internet, lifestyle centers, which compete with the downtown. Downtowns are at the end of the string. So that's a reality. But on the other hand, only one new mall has been constructed in America since 2006. And the substitute for that has been the lifestyle center streets of Tanasporn, a fake Main Street. This is in Hillsboro, Oregon. Salt Lake City, Utah, a lifestyle center called the Gateway, a fake Main Street. Candidate for city council in downtown Salt Lake City said this project has sucked the life out of downtown Salt Lake City as far as the retail. So lifestyle centers are masquerading town centers, and the reason we have this in here is important for decision makers to be aware of the competition and what's going on, and to have healthy downtown retail. One needs then to be able to compete with lifestyle centers, which are designed according to the formula. And that formula then is the old traditional Main Street. Now you see the red, and that is retail. That magenta color is parking on the street. And so that's a traditional retail Main Street. The old successful retail streets were configured this way. Hood River, Oregon is one of them. And when a new Main Street is built, and this is in West Elm, Nashville, Tennessee, there's a brand new Main Street. They follow that formula to the T because they know it will work. And there's the grocery store, the anchor, and there's adequate parking. There's a parking garage then out behind that grocery store. When you have no parking on the street, in other words, we take that magenta strip off the street, the retail gets anemic and it gets kind of gray. It only stays healthy if you have the on-street parking, and this is an unhealthy environment. One needs approximately 12,000 average trips a day on a retail street for it to stay healthy, believe it or not. Here's a retail street that was designed with only about 1,000 trips a day. It has been vacant for about 10 years. One-sided retail, you see that retail is only on the upper side of the street, is unhealthy. You need both sides retail. And if your retail is discontinuous, where you see those gaps, and that could be commercial, could be a parking lot, that's unhealthy as well. Now here's a commercial establishment. Here is, of course, one of something that is not retail. The traditional Main Street has anchors at either end. In other, we say it's an anchor because it brings shoppers into the downtown on a continuing basis. People need groceries every day, and they will come to a department store. So a retail anchor can be a grocery. It can be a department store. Here it is over in Missoula. It can be a cinema. This is in Lincoln, Nebraska. This 16-screen theater generates about 900,000 visitors a year, pulls them into the downtown. It can be a cluster of like things. For instance, for home furnishings, this is a kitchen supply store called Kitchen Caboodle. Here we are with Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn, and Restoration Hardware, all within a block of each other. So a cluster can serve as an anchor. The typical retail Main Street is about a quarter-mile long, that 5-minute walk. And so this is a typical mall. You'll find them all over the country. They're 1/4 mile long. And you need then the amenities on the street, places for kids, special features, acceptable restrooms. And you can then use that formula, or that recipe we talked about, to evaluate any street. This is Northwest 23rd in Portland, which is very pedestrian-friendly, child-friendly. And so it would rate as a green, which is good. You can take the Denver Mall, where they've spent a lot of money. It is be a fair. You can take Albuquerque's Central Avenue, where they spent a lot of money on designers for special equipment, special furniture, lighting, and sidewalk improvements. It's a pretty grim place. It's basically a poor. And finally, we take the Memphis Mall, which is about 8 blocks long. And here it is. It has a streetcar going right down the middle, and the retail is on both sides. And this headline showed up while we were in town. And downtown retail, will it ever show up? The answer is no, it won't. And there's a myth in here as well, where you see that pink at the bottom. Housing must come first. Developers and local officials say, and retail will follow. That's the old conventional formula. If you get the right retail configuration, the shoppers will find you. And so you take the Memphis Mall, it's poor when one looks at the recipe. Now it's got a high quality pedestrian environment, but that is not enough. A retail strategy for a downtown might look something like this. Is in Lincoln, Nebraska, the red being the retail, the A's being the anchors, for example. And you need a certain amount of retail to compete in a regional market. But on the other hand, this is a small community called Whitefish, Montana. Population 7,500 people. They have 140,000 square feet of retail. Now it is a visitor tourist economy, that's true. But we will be adding 175,000 square feet of retail, over 300,000. They in fact will become a regional destination. Another small community, this is the size of Olympia. Albany, Oregon has about 45,000 people, and we just finished this one up. You can see where the retail is. There are some key projects. Basically, these will probably be game changers that you see right here. They're identified. It doesn't mean you have to do everything all at once. They're just certain game changers. There are some proposed street improvements, but it's not essential. There are budgets saying how much money does the Urban Renewal Agency have to invest. And so, what about your downtown? You have a great retail fabric in your downtown, some wonderful old historic buildings which are a precious commodity, which are unique, which you need to hang on to, you need to enhance, you need to protect, because it's a one-of-a-kind resource. And so your downtown, I think, has great potential. What about another essential then of the complete plan? Great streets. There is a recipe again for that. Kind of boring, but there it is. I think the magic, or the great thing here, is that these streets have magic to them. When you're on a great street, you know it. It feels like it's a very special place. The streets are important because in any community, about 60% of the land is in private ownership and about 40% is in the streets. And if the streets are not taken care of and pedestrian friendly, it is not a place where anyone wants to be. So this is, of course, what happens. And this is what happens. Safety is an issue. The pedestrian needs to be protected from the roadway by parking if you can. We think about continuity. Sidewalks need to go across the roadways. People should never step off a sidewalk to cross the street. The cars should go up over the sidewalks at the intersections. And here is a recently completed street enhancement in downtown Whitefish, where we're rebuilding their entire old historic Main Street. And in Lake Oswego, not stepping off the curb. Active edges, of course, are important, and there are any number of examples here by when we talk about active edges. These are fun to walk by. Those streets need to have user appeal, whether it is wonderful landscaping or a special use such as a flower market, and certainly things for kids to do, because if the kids want to come, they will bring their parents. And so there needs to be things for all ages. And of course the amenities are important, and the paving is important, and the restrooms. And so where are your great streets? Which ones? Not every street has to be a great street, but there should be some signature streets in your downtown. The fourth essential is great transit. Again, there are certain requirements, and it's interesting to look at transportation, North American transportation history, because people say, oh, transit, that's a big, kind of a new phenomenon, you know, people aren't going to want to use it, but the electric streetcar was started up in about the 1880s, the commuter rail in the early 1900s, the motor bus, the bus in the 1920s, light rail in the 1970s, and the modern streetcar in the 1980s. And so we think of multiple modes in any community, certainly the bus rapid transit, the bus on an exclusive right-of-way. You see it here down in Springfield, where we just completed their plan, and the bus is on this exclusive roadway, the streetcar, and certainly light rail. All these modes are things that communities need to think about. Now, depending on the size of your community, one needs to think about affordability, but you need to, your community will grow over time and be positioned to have a great transit plan to serve your downtown. A downtown regional station is always important, where all these different modes then come together. Transit needs to serve the trip generators, and this is how people travel. Business trips, 25%. These are the national averages, the work trip, the shopping trip. So those are the three big ones that transit needs to serve. And for instance, in downtown Portland, the yellow would be the streetcar, the red would be the light rail transit, and the uses are then grouped around those trip generators. Housing, where you see the yellow, education, Portland State University, where the green is, and the employment, where you see the blue along the transit mall, the light rail transit mall. Platform safety, transit safety is an issue that is never ever talked about. Everyone likes to assume that transit's always safe, and there isn't a problem. But there are crime statistics associated with unsafe station platforms. And so these are statistics from Portland. And the high crime rate stations are in red, the low in green. Now, you can see that line going up to the north. They're all green because we learned something when we built stations in the early stages and out to the right-hand side, out to the east, and we were able to incorporate those lessons into the stations to the north. Now downtown you get some green stations, no robberies, no assaults, everything is wonderful. But there are eyes in on the platform. If you go out to Northeast 82nd, where that platform is in a freeway location, there are no eyes on that station. It's remote and it's isolated. And so you get the low crime stations, eyes on the platform. This is really pretty simple, but not always easy to achieve. And no eyes on the station in the high crime station. Something to keep in mind. We were driving here tonight to the meeting, and we were surrounded by buses in your downtown, which is great. And so you already have lots of transit. The trick is to figure out how to not only utilize it as best you can today, but certainly plan for the future to expand that system.